Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV, brought to you on Spectrum Cable. We've been on the air for about 16 years, bringing you community information. That's our job. And I'm here with Congressman Darren Soto. A lot of controversy, a lot of information, a lot of things going on in the Congress today. Darren is the representative. His office is up in Kissimmee. And we're going to talk about several subjects today. And the first one that we're going to hit is Puerto Rico and statehood. The status of Puerto Rico, which, by the way, we've been talking about this for like 50 years.
120 years.
Well, I'm only talking about myself because when I was in New York and I graduated high school, they were talking about Puerto Rico statehood or Puerto Rico independence. And that was in the late 60s.
Yeah.
So we're still talking about it 50 years later.
Well, what has really pushed us to the forefront is the disaster that is the recovery of Hurricane Maria and PROMESA fiscal board cuts that are decimating people's pensions. We have the highest death count in modern history after Hurricane Maria. 3,000 of our fellow Puerto Ricans died down there, longest blackout in modern history. And a lot of that is because Puerto Rico is just not represented by 2 senators and 4 members of Congress in Washington. Now, meanwhile, you add in the fact that there's been 2 plebiscites that have both been for statehood, and then you add in the fact that we're already pushing for statehood in the U.S. House for the District of Columbia. There's an equality issue to that. How can we push for D.C. statehood and leave Puerto Rico behind? I certainly came to this with fresh eyes, and that I didn't have a position one way or another. Went down for the plebiscite in 2017, saw it to be in compliance with law, and then adopted the position that was the result of the election. I have a lot of respect for independence too. My biggest concern is that the current status just isn't working. It is leading to this untenable situation that's literally killing people on the island.
Mm-hmm. When you say, you said that you have a sensitivity towards independence, do you really think that Puerto Rico can survive economically as an independent? And don't you think Cuba and other Venezuela would try to move in on Puerto Rico to absorb them?
So I have a lot of respect for the position. I personally don't have a problem with it if the people chose it. I think that there could be some problems compared to the enjoyment of being part of the United States that many Puerto Ricans enjoy. But I think this territorial status gets them between a rock and a hard place, and it's just super difficult unless they finally resolve this issue. And then we've had 2 plebiscites, and Congress has done nothing. So it's time for at least Congress to respect these elections.
Where's the blockade to finalize, to come to a conclusion in the Congress?
So this bill admits Puerto Rico as a state. It would simply do it.
Okay.
So this is the bill.
All right, that's okay. Tell us about the bill.
Sure.
And where is it?
The bill would admit Puerto Rico as a state, recognizing the 2017 plebiscite, where 97% of the people chose statehood. I recognize there are various opinions around that plebiscite. While the bill starts with a 90-day entry, we'd leave it to the committee of how long the transition could be. I could see it being a year or 2 ultimately.
Who is behind the bill? Who's on it?
So far it was co-introduced with the resident commissioner of Puerto Rico, Jennifer Gonzalez Colon, a Republican, along with me, a Democrat. We have some co-sponsors that we'll be releasing over the next couple weeks. But in addition, we have the chairman of the Natural Resources Committee, which I sit on, which has jurisdiction over Puerto Rico as an insular land. He's committed to hearing the bill and looking at the issue.
Has this bill actually been introduced?
Yes, it was introduced 2 weeks ago. It is 1965, the year of the Voting Rights Act.
Okay.
That's the bill number.
That's interesting. As a matter of fact, that's when I graduated high school. I'd like to get a copy of that bill.
Sure.
Your office can facilitate that for us.
Absolutely, and there's the internet, which is readily available on there.
That's Jesse's job.
Yeah. So
where's your biggest obstacle? Republicans? Who would be on the Republican side that's obstructing it? Are you at that point right now where there's a push against it?
It's an interesting mix. So you have a poll came out yesterday in Politico that over 80% of Puerto Rican eligible voters in Florida are supportive of it. So a lot of people in the area are supportive, but you have some folks who are both very right-wing, who don't want to see him change his status. You have some folks who are
Hispanic people?
yeah, and then folks on the left side, some of whom are for independence, and I get that, which is why I have a lot of respect for it. I just think the territorial status is killing him. And let me give you a few examples. So we had the 936 exemption, where Puerto Rico built up this great pharmaceutical economy, and then DC just took it away because they could. And that led to this.
When you say DC, you're talking about?
The Congress just took away that exemption that led to this. There's a lot of different reasons. I think there was some jealousy in the fact that Puerto Rico as a territory was getting all this business. There was apparently some rivalries in the Congress. But either way, Puerto Rico was powerless because it didn't have 2 U.S. senators, it didn't have 4 members of Congress to stop that. And then that led to the current recession. And even a lot of the debt is related to them propping up their Medicaid program because they get only 40-50% matches, which is less than the poorest state, Mississippi. That's what California gets. If Puerto Rico was a state, they would have got 90-95%, maybe even 100% paid. Our veterans don't get TRICARE down there. Even Medicaid is lower benefits. They don't get the child tax credit unless they have 3 children or more. Earned income tax credit. You don't get Social Security disability, and just the basic federal benefits that you get down there. And then it'd be ease of business. You wouldn't have these things like gimmicks like 936 around there. It'd be a state, and so that would help out the economy greatly. And they wouldn't need promesa anymore because under the 11th Amendment, they'd have sovereign immunity as a state. So they could just say, look, we have sovereign immunity on all these debts. Now, I wouldn't encourage them to eliminate them all because that would destroy their credit, but they'd be operating from a much stronger position. So it would definitely help the debt issue out. And after 2 plebiscites going forward on statehood, we have to take these things seriously. There's got to be a resolution to this.
On the other side of the aisle, a lot of people are looking at Puerto Rico as a need, give me situation. So the economic development concept, in order to balance that out psychologically and in reality over time, is extremely important in bringing Puerto Rico into the state. How much time do you think, when do you think the statehood issue is going to come to a point?
So I think it could be one of the pivotal issues of this election.
Campaign?
Politico, their big article today was that statehood looms large in Florida, the biggest swing state in the presidential election. 80% of Puerto Ricans plus supporting, who are eligible voters here in Florida and likely voters, are supporting it. So you'll see a lot of candidates have to talk about it. I mean, this is a state where elections are won by 0.1 or 0.3%. But I want to get back to something else you said. First of all, I think there is only one requirement to admit a new state. Congress shall admit new states, semicolon. It was so simple a process that our founding fathers didn't even make it a full sentence. Now, we've traditionally had elections to decide this, and there's been 2 in Puerto Rico, but probably frankly be a third before we, this 2020, before we actually get the issue moving in both chambers. But there's no barrier for economic viability. These have been the barriers that have been around since states started being admitted. They talked about language with California and New Mexico and Arizona. They talked about whether you had to be contiguous with Hawaii and with Alaska, and whether you could have states that have large indigenous populations like Alaska and Hawaii. They talked even about, could you be a nation and then a state, like Texas, which was a nation, or part of a nation be a state, like the Keys here in Florida. All these are arguments, but they're not constitutional requirements. So I would argue one of the reasons Puerto Rico will continue to do poorly economically is because it's not a state. Half the money they borrowed was to supplement federal programs that they're not getting full money for, like Medicaid, where they had to borrow billions to prop up their Medicaid program because they're not getting the money that they would as a state. So if you wait, we'll never get there. It's clearly that the status is helping to drive the economic depression, which started with an act of Congress, which is the 936 exemption being removed. That started the depression to begin with. That's still going on to this day. So all this is connected.
Yeah. All right, Darren, I appreciate your time today. If you want to answer another couple of questions, one-liners, you up for that?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. The Republicans are touting very strongly that the whole Democratic Party is going towards socialism. What do you think about that? Ocasio-Cortez and her philosophy and on the Green Deal and stuff like that.
So you mentioned one member out of the 230.
No, but that's the one that's getting the most publicity.
Allow me to.
Okay.
So I'm a proud capitalist who supports a strong social safety network. So I throw the question back to my Republican colleagues: which program are you looking to get rid of? Medicare, Medicaid, SNAP, unemployment, WIC, food stamps? Because those are social safety net programs. I'm a capitalist, but I believe in those. Those aren't socialist programs. Those are fundamental bedrocks of the middle class. And just because one member or two members have certain philosophies, judge us by what we're passing out of the U.S. House, not by what is the most headline-worthy statement made by a member.
Okay.
And you'll see we are passing out some pretty steady issues. Fixing the Affordable Care Act, lowering prescription drug prices, protecting net neutrality, getting back in the Paris Climate Accord. You don't see us passing out this overarching issue regarding Green New Deal. Now, I do agree that these goals are things we have to strive to, but it's really just goals. I'm working on the plan to get there, and it starts with the Paris Climate Accord. We're the only country in the world that isn't in it, and we help write it. Talk about shirking away from American leadership in the world.
The concept of the Paris environmental situation, that accord, was that we would be suffering as a country because all of the restrictions would be put on us and not on China or Iran or other countries. So that we would be closing down our industries and they wouldn't.
So, by the way, our utilities and our automakers are already complying with it, even though President Trump has moved to. They're in fact exceeding it already. So this idea that the greatest, most innovative country in the world can't meet this is absurd.
Okay.
They are literally, private industry is leaving us in the dust while we're still debating this stuff. They're already meeting this stuff because they want to compete. We saw in the 70s, auto manufacturers take for granted innovation, and they got hit pretty hard in the 80s by the Japanese. They're not going to let that happen again. Fuel efficiency is important for consumers, both to save money and to save the planet. In addition, the reason why some of these other countries have different peaks than us is we started a century earlier than them, polluting. So when the world came together, it recognized that certain countries like England and Germany and the United States were polluting a century before anybody else.
Yeah, but China's right up with us now.
And guess
they're
what?
And they're getting preferred treatment on those environmental restrictions.
Do we set American excellence by the basement goals of China and Russia? Or do we pass them in the dust with the Green Revolution and come up with energy for the next generation and beyond? You know, this isn't just about looking behind and saying, oh no, we fossil fuels, this and that. This is about what if we actually solve these issues. We're looking at a world where we will dominate this century. If we don't do this stuff and we're still relying on fossil fuels for the next 100 years, not only will we face famine, political disruption, and a warming planet, but we will also be left in the dust by some other country that figures this stuff out.
Okay.
We lead in this world, and the energy revolution is going to define who dominates the 21st century.
Well, we are out of time. Darren, thank you so much for the interview, and we'll be back, to follow up and see how things are progressing.
Always.
This is Danny Ramos. We'll see you next week on Hispanic Speak Out TV.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her, and her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Hi.
Hello. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Joelle Falcon. I'm actually here to interview Ms. Jan Edwards today. Let's start off with some introductions. So, tell me about yourself. I know that you are an advocate for trafficking, human trafficking.
Yes.
So, how did you actually get into this?
So, short stories, God. Longer stories, I was on a mission trip to Ethiopia, and it was there that I witnessed human trafficking. And you don't really know sometimes what it looks like. That's why they say it's hidden in plain sight. It was 2 younger girls, 2 older men, and it just didn't feel right. And when I went to our sponsor's home, I shared with them what I saw. And they were like, oh, yeah, it's human trafficking. I'm like, okay, this is 2013. And I'm like, yeah, we're the #1 source of human trafficking in the Middle East. And I was like, hang on a second. I go, wait, stop. I go, you're telling me that people are selling people? It's like, this is 2013. Didn't that stop like back in 18? And he's like, no. Yeah, so I came home and I did some research and discovered that Florida has the 3rd highest number of calls to the National Trafficking Hotline.
Wow.
Most people don't know that. And it's a good, like, there's the front side of the hand, the back side of the hand of this, right? So the good news is people are actually picking up the phone and calling.
Yeah.
Right? So we've done a great job in raising awareness here in Central Florida. The bad news is they're having to pick up the phone and call.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what's so we're behind California and Texas, and then Orange County is #2 in the state for trafficking cases. So it just wasn't okay with me. And then when I found out the average age of entry is 12 to 14, really wasn't okay with me. So I really went on a mission to discover what was missing. You know, I'm clear it's an atrocity. When people find out about it, it's an atrocity. Why doesn't everybody know about this? And so that's really what was missing, is awareness. So I talked to several law enforcement agencies, including some undercover police officers and some survivors, and I asked them all the same question: what's missing? And they said awareness. And I've had 25 years of marketing and media experience working in telecommunications industry. I'm like, well, that's something I can do. So I've written and produced an award-winning film. It's called Trapped in the Trade, and we use that for the basis of all our training programs. We've trained over 8,000 youth and adults in the past 2 years on this topic. And it's been really interesting in that, because I was really committed that we empower our kids. We educate our kids, we empower our kids such that we can prevent it. And what's been fascinating is when we go in and educate the kids, now the parents are interested. You know, if it was the other way around, because look, this is a weird topic to talk about. First of all, we're talking about sex. That freaks people out alone. But when you're talking about sex trafficking, in particular child exploitation, it's a really difficult thing for people to wrap their heads around. And so, and as a parent, you gotta ask yourself the question: how do I have that conversation with my child?
It's true.
How do I even start the conversation? So when we educate the kids go home, which actually develops this really beautiful conversation that happens at home with children and their parents about learning about it together. And to me, that's really the miracle of this. We're doing a program with some middle school kids in Seminole County, and a 13-year-old boy went home and told his mom and said, "Mom, I now know why you don't want me to be on social media. I now know why you don't want me to play live video games. I get it now."
Wow.
Now, this is a conversation the parents been having for a while, but it took an outside party, a third person, to actually wake that child up such that they could have that conversation with their parents. And the parents are forever grateful. The mom wrote a line in a letter that I'm stealing, borrowing and just taking it. And it's, you know, if our children are young enough to be trafficked, they're old enough to be educated.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, you were talking about social media and live video gaming. Is that like one of the main sources of trafficking?
It sure is.
Oh my God.
It sure is. 90% of grooming and recruitment happens right here on social media apps. And you'd be amazed at how many apps there are. Any kind of app that connects with the outside world, right? It's other than just not gaming on your phone. But anything that's got a chat feature, your child is at risk. And look, predators will go where children are.
Yeah.
You know, when we just saw, you know, a teacher arrested last month for creating child pornography.
Oh my gosh.
You know, a couple of, you know, years ago, there was some bus and some employees from particular places here that lots of families go to. They were part of that bus too. So, you know, they go where the children are. So if children are on apps, they're going to be on apps. And that's really the conversation we like to have with parents is, you know, I get the privacy thing, but here's the deal. You're a parent. They're not 18 yet. You're responsible for them, and you're responsible for their safety. You're responsible for what happens to them. And I know it's not easy, and yes, it's challenging taking the phone away from a child, but here's the deal. Your child's life literally is at stake. So do you want to have a child angry at you and they get over that, knowing that you're doing this to protect them and keep them safe and love them, or something else. Because you always get to choose. And we really talk to parents about, you've got to have this conversation with your children. You have to bring it forward. You've got to be okay with it. And that's part of what we talk about is share a fact. The fact that Florida is number 3 in the nation. My favorite place to have conversations with my daughter used to be in the car, because you're side by side, so it's not threatening, it's not across the way, and they can't go anywhere. So you can say, hey, I learned something today. I heard that Florida's ranked 3rd with the number of calls to human trafficking hotline. Did you know that? And you're going to get one of 2 responses. Really? I had no idea. Well, what is human trafficking? What's child exploitation? You can start a conversation that way. Or my favorite is if they're like, no way. You can say way. Then you can look it up on your phone. Go look, type it in, type National Trafficking Hotline. Tell me what you see.
Wow.
So it gets a conversation going. And every time we speak, I ask people, I said, please. I said, first of all, put the 800 number in your phone, right? The National Trafficking Hotline is 888. I'll say it slow. 3737 888. You want to put that in your phone. You can call it 24/7, 7 days a week. It's all anonymous. I said, the second thing, I said, I want you to share something you learned. I want you to share that the average age is 12 to 14. I want you to share that grooming and recruitment takes place online. I want you to share, go look that information up, because then you're educated. And if you're educated, you're empowered to take an action. If you're empowered to take an action, you can actually interrupt the cycle.
Wow. Well, how would you go about like preventative measures and stuff? I know that you talked about talking to children more in depth about it, but like what other steps can be taken for the actual like child to know other than...
Well, that's part of the education, right? So they have to know what human trafficking looks like, right? They've got to know what grooming and recruitment tactics are. And one of the examples that we use is, the social media has become like the town crier of the olden day, where any grievance you have, it generally ends up on social media. Yeah. And then people comment, right? So it's, my mom did this, my dad didn't pick me up on time, my boyfriend, blah, 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 my best, whatever complaint du jour. And there are predators out there trolling online looking for that, pretending to be another 14 or 15-year-old. And so like, hey, you know what, my, boyfriend did the same thing. Let's go, whatever together. Let's go party together this weekend and forget our boyfriends. Well, children believe that a relationship here is a relationship. Now you can start a relationship here. You can maintain a relationship here. And I believe, this is just my opinion, right? That your relationships are here, interpersonal. Then it can go to here, right? You want to know who you're talking to. So, right. And then the next thing you know is they end up at a concert with somebody that they don't know that's not 14, and there you go. So, you want to understand what grooming and recruitment tactics are. So it's people that promise love quickly, that offer you gifts, that promise a life that you've always dreamed of. And what I tell the kids about is, hey, look, there is no free lunch. If they're promising you something that seems too good to be true, it is. You want to do the research. You're smart. Kids are smart. Use that intellect and check stuff out. Check people out. If you're getting 10 friend requests a day, check all those people out. Do you know them? And even if they're friends of friends of friends, doesn't mean they're your friends.
That's true. So I completely understand where you're coming from, because when I was younger, I almost got snatched up myself, but it wasn't due to social media. It was just because, I was in the porch by myself. My mom was gone for 2 minutes trying to use the bathroom. And thank goodness that I locked the porch door, because there was a guy that ran up to the porch and started trying to yank it open.
Wow.
And after that experience, I wanted my mom to know what was going on in my life. I wanted her to be aware of my surroundings and stuff. I wanted her to be there to protect me.
Absolutely.
And so I had no problems having the computer be in the living room to be able to chat with my friends. I had no problem with my mom listening to our conversations and stuff, because I felt safer that way.
Absolutely.
That a lot of people who haven't been through that experience don't feel comfortable with sharing with their parents. And so I'm just wondering, like, how do we get from that point without giving them that experience?
Sure. It's having the conversation. It's really saying, look, you know, have you seen that in the news, right? Have you seen this in the news? Have you seen that in the news? And then you have an open, honest conversation with them. There's applications that parents can put on their phones and their laptops. And I always coach the parents, don't have that conversation don't do that without having the conversation.
Yeah.
It's like you want to sit down and create that bond. And you know, the other thing too is have family time. Have everybody put their cell phone in a basket when they get home and talk to each other, right? And create those relationships, because at some point in time, a child's behavior will alter, and unless you know your child, you'll think it's teenage angst, when in reality there's something happening and they feel guilt and shame and they can't talk to you about it because they're afraid that you'll take away your love. And what I want to tell kids is there's nothing you can do for a parent to not love you. Your parents will always love you, regardless of what that is. They may be upset at you and they may experience disappointment, but that goes away, right? They love you and they want to keep you safe.
Yeah. And, you know, any of those people that are like in the trafficking, how hard is it to get out?
Well, there's a lot of, you know, it's very difficult, and they're not rescued. They actually have to choose to leave the life. They have to see that there's hope. And a lot of the survivors that we work with will say, I wasn't rescued, I chose. So I was able to see the hand that was held out for me, because there's a lot of psychological damage done to someone who's being trafficked. It's, you know, very much like domestic violence, the, you know, demeaning conversations, the you're not worth this, you're that, all lies. But when you get it over a period of time, you start to believe that you're not that. And so the psychological, the threats and the coercion and the force, you know, used against these children, you got to remember they're 14 years old. Your brain's not fully developed till they're 25. So you've got a child whose family's life is in the balance because someone's threatening them. They're going to do what they have to do. And you know what we tell kids is there's nothing worth being blackmailed for. Your life is too important. If someone's trying to threaten you, that's actually against the law. Go have a conversation with a trusted adult.
Wow. That's actually,
it's today's world.
Yeah.
You know, like, this is today's world. You know, and it has to do with every, you know, mental health is a really important piece here. And if you are under duress and you're experiencing some level of trauma, bullying, whatever that is, you've got to have a safe person to go speak to. You know, there is no stigma. Today's world it's highly stressful.
Yeah.
And for someone to go, oh no, I'm fine, I don't have any trauma to deal with, well, then there's just not being in reality. Everybody has trauma to deal with. You know, sometimes it's greater and sometimes it's less, but it's still trauma to be worked out, and that's why we have mental health professionals. So that's what we want to do.
Wow. Well, I honestly really appreciate you coming and speaking with us today.
You're welcome.
And I hope that this has been a pleasure, because it was definitely a pleasure and enlightening for me.
And hopefully helpful to those watching.
This is Speak Out TV. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next week.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year, because she's in foster care, because her father abused her, and her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino light beers. Enjoy responsibly.